Alliance for True Democracy unveils political reform proposal. New report points to slower growth in mainland tourist numbers. And the deep freeze in the United States.
Good evening. The Alliance for True Democracy has unveiled its proposal for universal suffrage in the 2017 chief executive election. It includes both civil and political party nominations of candidates. And in what's described as an olive branch, candidates will need to get the nominating committee's approval. Evelina Leung tells us more.
The nomination of candidates in the 2017 chief executive election has so far been one of the major controversial issues in implementing universal suffrage in Hong Kong. With the government consultation exercise now underway, the Alliance for True Democracy today unveiled its proposal. The alliance said candidates are to be nominated by civil nomination, political party nomination, or the nominating committee. Under civil nomination, a candidate needs the endorsement of 1% of registered voters. Political party nomination stipulates that a party that received at least 5% of the votes in the last Legislative Council election can independently or jointly nominate a candidate. But candidates put forward under either option still has to get the green light from the nominating committee. The alliance does point out the composition of the committee should be the more democratic the better, and that it cannot refuse to endorse any candidates through civil or political party nominations who meet general election requirements. And conditions for candidacy such as Love China, Love Hong Kong and no confrontations with Beijing should not apply. The convener of the alliance said it has already made concessions in its proposal.
We see this as a recognition process, a formality to demonstrate our respect for the power and authority of the nomination committee. We do not want to use the word rubber stamp.
The Democratic Party voiced support for today's proposal, despite disagreements among pan-Democrats.
I don't think I have to deny these internal conflicts, but Democratic Party would like to make clear at this stage we are in full support of the package put forward by Alliance for True Democracy today.
Tam Yu-jung, chairman of the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong, stressed the role played by the nominating committee cannot be replaced.
The first round of public consultation on universal suffrage in Hong Kong began last month and will end on May 3rd. During this time, the Chief Secretary for Administration, Carrie Lam, has been inviting lawmakers to dinner gatherings to ask for their opinions on this issue. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
The increase in the number of mainland tourists visiting Hong Kong will slow this year. That's according to the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. As Jenny Lam reports, that's prompting calls for the local tourism trade to increase its competitive edge.
Shopping in Causeway Bay, one of the favourite activities for mainland tourists in Hong Kong. Ms. Dang has been here more than 20 times. She chooses Hong Kong because it is close to home and it is easy to get here. The rising value of the renminbi against the Hong Kong dollar is good news for shoppers. And many of them admit they are here for the shopping rather than the sightseeing. Mainland tourist numbers are expected to top a record 41 million in 2014, according to a green paper published by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. But the growth rate will slow from 12% last year to 7% this year. The reasons? There aren't enough support facilities for tourists, government policies such as the restrictions on baby formula milk purchase, and cultural differences between Hong Kong and the mainland. Executive Director of the Travel Industry Council, Joseph Tung, says the findings ring alarm bells for Hong Kong. Mainland tourists now have many choices of holiday destinations other than Hong Kong. Their shopping habits have changed, he says. They used to buy luxury items, but now they tend to shop for everyday products. Mainland visitors account for more than 70% of Hong Kong's total. The Travel Industry Council points out that the tourism industry worldwide is trying to attract mainland visitors. Tung believes for Hong Kong to stay competitive, the territory needs to come up with new events and activities so that tourists will keep coming back. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Turning overseas now, weather forecasters are calling it a polar vortex, but people across North America are just calling it unbearable. Much of the continent remains in the icy grip of a massive polar air mass. As James Aitken reports, millions of miserable people are doing whatever they can to stay warm.
It's a winter deep freeze that is almost unprecedented.
We bundle up in layers. Whatever we have to use to stay warm. I'm using a towel as a scarf.
Temperature records that have stood for decades are shattering like icicles falling on rocks. People across Canada and the United States are wondering what they did to deserve this frigid winter nightmare.
You can't even walk in this, man. You can't even sleep. You can't do nothing. We're ready for the summertime.
The sub-zero cold followed inches of snow and high winds that's being blamed for several deaths. Temperatures are up to 20 degrees Celsius below normal for this time of the year. Tens of thousands of homes are without electricity, and many customers are being told they could be in the dark and cold for a few more days. Some state governors have issued disaster declarations. Travel has become treacherous and in some cases impossible. On Monday, 1 out of every 10 U.S. domestic departures were canceled. The winter blast has left travel plans in tatters and travelers in a lurch.
We've been just sitting here. We slept here, and that's it. Yeah.
You've been sleeping here?
Yeah. We've been taking turns.
And they told me that my flight was canceled and I had nowhere to go, obviously, because I'm not from here, from Canada. And so I stayed in the airport.
And airports aren't the only places to find stranded travelers.
We got news that another train was coming to rescue us, but then that train got stuck. And then we had news another train was going to come pull us back, but that train couldn't help us because another train was on the track and got stuck.
The only thing they had was coffee and soda, and I thought we were going to starve.
There is some relief in sight as the Arctic air mass slowly inches southeast, stoking hopes that somewhat warmer weather and relief is not far behind. James Aitken, TVB News.
Well, Robert Gates, the former CIA chief and U.S. Defense Secretary, has landed a devastating critique of the Obama administration's national security policies. The criticisms are leveled by Gates in his new memoir titled Duty: Memoirs of a Secretary at War. NBC News with more.
When Bob Gates left the Obama cabinet, the president surprised his defense secretary with the Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor.
You're not only one of the longest serving secretaries of defense in American history, but it is also clear that you've been one of the best.
I'm deeply honored and moved.
But in his sensational new memoir, Gates excoriates the president, Vice President Joe Biden, and former National Security Advisor Tom Donilon for their handling of the war in Afghanistan and the military. Gates says suspicion and distrust of senior military officers by senior White House officials, including the president and vice president, became a big problem for me. After a March 2010 National Security Council meeting, Gates writes, I thought the president doesn't trust his commander, can't stand Karzai, doesn't believe in his own strategy, and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out. This, although Gates had told Matt Lauer about the war.
I think we're all on the same page.
But in his book, Gates accuses Biden of poisoning the well against the military leadership and cites Donilon and his national security team for, quote, aggressive, suspicious, and sometimes condescending and insulting questioning of our military leaders. And while praising Hillary Clinton, Gates expresses dismay at hearing Clinton tell the president she only opposed the Iraq war because she was running against him in the Iowa caucuses. Gates writes that the president in turn conceded his opposition to the Iraq surge was political. Still, despite his unusually harsh criticism of Obama, Gates calls the president's approval of the raid against Osama bin Laden one of the most courageous decisions I had ever witnessed in the White House. But the Gates book is arming critics of Obama's Iraq strategy as well.
90-some young Americans died in Fallujah. 600 were wounded. Now we see people driving around with black al-Qaeda flags. That's so sad. What do we tell their families?
The White House says that the president deeply appreciates Bob Gates' service, welcomes differences of view, but disagrees with his assessment.
The first batch of dangerous chemicals in Syria's arsenal has been taken out of the country under tight scrutiny. As Alan Buckner reports, the operation came against a backdrop of a widening civil war and infighting among rebel groups.
The raw materials, precursor chemicals for poison gas, were moved from 2 sites in Syria and loaded onto a Danish ship. Security for the highly toxic cargo is being provided by warships from China, Russia, Denmark, and Norway. A United Nations spokesman says the ship will stay at sea off the coast of Syria while other chemicals are collected, although it's still not known how much there will be.
At this stage, there's a process of several phases by which material will be loaded as more and more material arrive at the port of Latakia. I think we might give a final number at that point.
The chemicals will eventually be transferred to a U.S. ship and taken to be destroyed. Meanwhile, the civil war in Syria has taken a new dimension over the past week, as rebel groups are fighting amongst themselves. The Nusra Front is an Islamic militant group that is trying to topple the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. But the group is now doing battle with the ISIL, an al-Qaeda-linked organization that sees itself as trying to build Islamic rule. Its leadership is mostly foreign, stirring resentment. That's contributed to a postponement of a vote by the opposition on whether to attend a Geneva peace conference with the Syrian government that was to open on January 22nd. Syria's information minister said his government would be sending a political delegation to Geneva. But Omran al-Zubi said there would be no talks with militant factions. And the United Nations Human Rights Office says it's stopped updating the death toll from the civil war, now in its 3rd year, confirming it can no longer verify the sources. Its last count was at least 100,000 dead in July of 2013. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
Former NBA star Dennis Rodman and his group of American basketball players held a final practice with North Korean players in Pyongyang this morning. This came ahead of an exhibition match which Rodman says is for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's birthday.
This is his gift from me, from the world. I love the guy. The guy is my friend forever and ever and ever.
Well, comments like this have made at least one of the players on Rodman's team uneasy. Former NBA star Charles D. Smith said he already felt remorse for coming to North Korea because the event has been dwarfed by politics and tainted by Rodman's comments.
And still ahead in the news tonight. Hong Kong TV and TVB negotiate leasing of transmitting stations. Teenager gets probation for stealing bus. And Manchester United suffer yet another defeat.